The birthday evening was quiet, almost too quiet for Elena. She sat alone in her small apartment, the walls around her painted in warm cream but carrying a cold emptiness. A single candle stood in the middle of a small cake she had bought from the bakery down the street. The flame flickered gently, lighting her tired face. The golden glow touched her eyes, but it could not hide the sadness hiding behind them. It was her 45th birthday, a day that should have been full of laughter, hugs, and voices calling out her name, but the silence inside the room was louder than any noise she could imagine. She sat by the window, looking at the city outside. Cars rushed past, their headlights painting streaks of light across the dark road. Somewhere far, a group of friends laughed loudly as they walked together. The sound of their joy floated into her apartment and stabbed her heart gently, reminding her of everything she did not have. Elena closed her eyes and whispered, "Happy birthday." Elena. Her voice was soft, almost broken, as if she was saying it not to herself but to the empty air around her. She looked at the cake, small and plain, with no decorations except a few white swirls of cream. There was no one to clap, no one to sing, no one to tell her she mattered. Her phone lay on the table. The screen was black, silent, and heavy. She picked it up and checked. No calls, no messages, just work emails that had nothing to do with love, nothing to do with care. Not even a simple happy birthday from someone close. She thought of her younger days, how she used to dream of birthdays with a family around her. She had once believed that by this age, she would have a partner by her side, children who would light candles and laugh loudly, maybe even argue over who would cut the cake first. But life had not given her that. Instead, it gave her a small apartment, a job that paid bills, and loneliness that grew heavier each year. She tried to smile. She told herself she was strong, that she didn't need anyone to make her happy. But her heart did not believe it. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away as if even the walls would judge her for being weak. Outside, the wind picked up, the curtains swayed gently, carrying in the cool night air. Elena wrapped her arms around herself and leaned back in the chair. She remembered how her colleagues at work had smiled politely earlier in the day, but no one remembered. It was her birthday. No one asked her plans. She had eaten lunch alone at her desk, pretending it did not matter. But it did. It mattered deeply. She lit the candle and stared at it. The flame danced. Fragile yet stubborn, just like her. "Make a wish," she whispered. To herself, she closed her eyes. What could she wish for? Love, companionship, a family, or just the strength to live another year with this loneliness? When she opened her eyes again, the room felt even quieter. She leaned forward and blew out the candle. The smoke rose gently, disappearing into the dark ceiling. The cake remained untouched. Her heart ached with a deep, quiet pain. She thought of the voices of people she knew, neighbors who always asked why she was still single, relatives who pitied her, men who had walked away because she was too serious, too strong, or simply not enough. Every word of theirs had built walls around her, and tonight those walls pressed in closer than ever. Elena stood up and walked to the mirror. She looked at her reflection. Lines of time touched her skin, but her eyes still carried a quiet fire. She was not ugly. She was not weak. She was just alone. She touched her cheek, tracing the path where the tear had fallen. "You're still here," she whispered to her reflection. "You're still standing." But even those words felt heavy. She turned away and sat back at the table. She cut a small piece of the cake and put it in her mouth. The sweetness filled her tongue, but it could not reach her heart. It tasted hollow, empty, like eating a memory of what should have been. The night grew deeper. The city outside slowed down. Elena blew out the candle completely and sat in the dim glow of her lamp. Her heart throbbed with sadness, but deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe one day, someone would see her, truly see her, and she would not have to sit alone on her birthday. For now, though, the night was hers alone. She leaned against the chair, closed her eyes, and let the silence wrap her like a blanket. Her heart was broken, but it was still beating, and as long as it beat, there was still hope. The whispering crowd morning sun poured through the thin curtains, brushing Elena's face with pale light. She opened her eyes slowly, her body heavy from a night of thoughts. The cake still sat on the table, half untouched. The candle melted down to a stub. The room felt smaller than ever, like it was closing in around her. Elena decided she couldn't sit inside all day. She needed air, even if the world outside felt cold. She dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress that had always made her feel a little braver. It hugged her figure softly, reminding her that she still had beauty, even if others had failed to see it. She tied her hair back, put on a touch of lipstick, and told herself, "You can do this. Just walk outside. Just breathe." The marketplace was alive with color and sound. Vendors called out, children ran between stalls, and the smell of roasted corn and spices filled the air. Elena walked slowly, carrying her small bag, her shoes tapping lightly against the stone path. At first, it felt refreshing, the buzz of people, the laughter of strangers, the golden sun warming her skin. But soon, the whispers began. "She's still single at her age," a woman muttered as she passed. "I heard no man wanted her. Too proud, maybe," another voice followed. "Such a shame. Look at her, wasting away her years," an older man said, shaking his head. Elena kept walking, her face calm, her back straight. But inside, every word struck like a stone thrown at fragile glass. She wanted to shout, "I am more than what you think. I am not broken," yet her lips remained sealed, her dignity her only shield. A group of younger women passed by, their laughter bright and sharp. One whispered loudly enough for Elena to hear, "She dresses like she's 20, but she's 45. Who does she think she's fooling?" The others giggled. Elena's steps slowed, but she forced herself forward. The marketplace that had seemed warm now felt like a stage where she was the only actor, and everyone else was the critic. Their eyes followed her, their whispers sticking to her skin like dust she couldn't wash off. She stopped at a fruit stall. The vendor, a kind-looking man, smiled and said, "Good morning, ma'am. Fresh apples today." For a moment, his simple kindness gave her comfort. She touched the fruit gently, trying to steady her breath. But even then, she heard the women at the next stall whispering, 45 and still no husband. She must be cursed. Elena's hand froze on the apple. The words were cruel, but the worst part was how easily people believed them. She paid for the apples and walked away, her fingers trembling as she held the bag. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, to vanish so their voices would no longer follow her. She found a quiet bench near the fountain at the center of the marketplace. Water splashed gently, the sound soft and calming, but Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. She looked at the families passing by, mothers holding children's hands, fathers carrying bags, couples laughing together. It was as if the world was reminding her of everything she didn't have. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall in public. She lifted her chin, forcing herself to appear strong, though her soul felt heavy. "Why do they only see my emptiness?" she thought. "Why can't they see my strength, my kindness, my heart?" A young boy ran past, his laughter pure and innocent. He nearly bumped into her, then turned and smiled. "Sorry, Annie," he said before running back to his mother. That small smile, so genuine and free of judgment, made Elena's chest ache. In a different way, it reminded her that not all eyes saw her as broken. Some saw her as simply human. Still, the whispers had carved deep scars. Elena stood up from the bench, her bag of apples pressing into her hand, and began walking back home. The streets were alive, but to her they felt cruel. Every corner carrying another pair of judging eyes. By the time she reached her apartment, her steps were slow. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her body shaking with the effort of holding herself together. The silence of her home felt kinder than the noise outside, but it also reminded her of her loneliness. She placed the apples on the table and sat down heavily. For a long time, she just stared at the wall, her thoughts swirling. She whispered to herself, "Why do they think my worth is only in a man's hands? Why do they measure me by what I don't have, instead of what I am?" The room gave no answer. Only her own breathing filled the space. Elena felt a tear slide down her cheek. She let it fall this time. She didn't wipe it away. She allowed herself to feel the pain, raw and real, because she knew pretending to be strong would only break her further. The city outside was alive, but in her small apartment, Elena sat quietly with her sadness, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a small flame still burned, the stubborn belief that her life could mean more than the whispers, that her story was not yet finished. For now, though, she sat alone, listening to the echo of voices that had wounded her, wondering when the world would finally see her for who she truly was. The invitation next morning, Elena woke up slowly, her eyes swollen from the tears she had let fall the night before. The city was already awake. The sound of traffic floated through her window, and voices of children walking to school filled the street. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Her apartment felt heavier than ever. The untouched apples on the table reminded her of yesterday's whispers. She sighed deeply and made herself a cup of tea. The steam curled upward, warming her face, but it did little to ease the chill in her chest. Her phone buzzed suddenly. Elena's heart jumped. For a second, she hoped it was someone remembering her birthday, even if late. But when she checked, it was a message from her co-worker, Leila. "Hi, Elena. We're having a small gathering tonight at the cafe near the park. Everyone from the office is invited. You should come too. It'll be fun." Elena stared at the message. Her first instinct was to ignore it. She didn't want to sit in a crowd, pretending to be happy while people whispered behind her back. But then, another part of her whispered, "If you stay home again, the silence will eat you alive." She typed slowly, "Thank you. I'll try to come." The day dragged on. Elena cleaned her apartment, folded clothes, and tried to distract herself, but her mind kept returning to the cafe gathering. She feared being judged, feared being reminded again of what she didn't have. Yet, a small piece of her longed to feel like she belonged, even if just for one evening by sunset. Elena stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress. This time, she wore a soft maroon gown that reached just below her knees. She brushed her hair until it shone and applied light makeup. She looked at herself and whispered, "Just breathe. You are enough." The cafe near the park glowed with warm lights. Strings of lanterns hung from the trees, and laughter spilled into the night air. Elena hesitated at the entrance, clutching her purse tightly. She could see her co-workers already gathered, Leila waving her hands while telling a story, Peter laughing loudly, others chatting in small groups. Elena stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. Leila noticed her first and rushed over with a smile. "Elena, I'm so glad you came." Her warm tone eased Elena's nerves, even if only a little. She joined the group, offering polite smiles as conversation swirled around her. At first, no one paid her much attention, and that was a relief. But slowly, eyes turned toward her. "So, Elena," one man asked with a smirk, "when are you finally going to settle down? Don't you think 45 is a bit late?" The laughter that followed was light, but it burned in her ears. Elena's chest tightened. She forced a smile and replied softly, "Life doesn't always follow the same timeline for everyone." But another woman added quickly, "Well, maybe if you weren't so serious all the time, men would notice you more." The words dripped with false sweetness. Elena's hands clenched under the table. Her teacup trembled as she lifted it. She wanted to walk out, to escape their sharp tongues. But Leila touched her arm gently. "Don't listen to them," she whispered. Still, the damage was done. Every sentence felt like another knife. Elena excused herself and stepped outside for air. The night sky stretched wide above her, stars hidden behind city lights. She leaned against the railing, her heart heavy, her thoughts raced. Why am I always the joke? Why am I always the story people tell when they want to laugh about loneliness? Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her. "People can be cruel. Don't let them define you." Elena turned. It was an older man sitting at a corner table outside, his eyes kind, his face marked by years of experience. He had been quietly sipping his coffee, unnoticed by everyone else. Elena blinked, surprised. "Were you listening?" He smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to, but pain speaks loudly, even when you don't say much. I've seen it before." His words softened something in her chest. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel invisible. "Why do they only see what I don't have?" she whispered. "Because it's easier." He replied calmly. "People fear what they don't understand. A woman strong enough to stand alone scares them more than one who follows the path they expect." Elena felt tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. She quickly turned away, but the man's voice was steady, almost soothing. "Don't waste your strength fighting their small minds. Live for yourself. That's harder, but it's worth it." Elena didn't know who he was, but his words wrapped around her like a blanket against the cold night. For the first time in days, her heart felt a little lighter. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." When she walked back inside, she was still hurt, but her steps carried a quiet strength. Something had shifted. She realized that even in the noise of judgment, there could be voices of kindness if only she listened. The breaking point next week passed slowly for Elena. The evening at the cafe had left a deep mark on her heart. She kept hearing their words echoing in her head, mocking, sharp, unforgettable. She tried to focus on work, tried to hide behind her routine, but the whispers followed her everywhere. Even in silence thought at the office, she caught glances that lingered. Too long. A young intern once asked her directly, "Miss Elena, why don't you have a husband? Didn't you want a family?" The question was innocent, but it pierced her like a blade. She answered with a forced smile, "Life doesn't give everything at once," but deep inside, her heart screamed out. By Friday evening, Elena was exhausted not from work, but from the heavy weight of pretending. When she stepped into her apartment, the walls felt too close, the air too heavy. She placed her bag on the chair and sank onto the sofa. The city outside was alive with laughter and lights. She could hear music from a nearby house, people celebrating, perhaps a birthday or anniversary. Each burst of laughter made her chest ache more. Finally, something inside her broke. She stood up and walked to the mirror, her eyes red with unshed tears. "Why am I never enough?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why do they make me feel like I am less, just because I am alone?" Her reflection stared back, silent but honest. She saw the lines of age, yes, but also the strength in her eyes. She saw a woman who had survived storms, who had worked hard, who had given kindness where others had given cruelty. Yet society reduced her to a single label, single at 40-5. The pain boiled over. She walked to the table, grabbed her half-empty journal, and opened a blank page. With shaking hands, she began to write. "They call me alone, but they do not see the nights I hold myself together. They call me incomplete, but they do not see the battles I have fought without help. They call me less, but they do not see the love in my heart, the care I give to others, the fire that still burns in me. They laugh at me, but they do not see that I am still here, breathing, standing, surviving." Her pen scratched furiously against the paper, her tears dripping onto the page. For the first time, she was not hiding from her emotions. She poured them out, raw and unfiltered, as if the journal was the only witness who would not judge her. When she finally dropped the pen, her hands were trembling, her chest heaving. The pages were filled with messy words, but they carried truth, a truth no one had cared to ask her about. She closed the book and pressed it to her chest. "I am not broken," she whispered. "I am not worthless." But the world outside did not stop. The laughter from the nearby house grew louder, almost mocking. Elena covered her ears, but the noise still pressed in. She stood abruptly, pacing across the room. Her emotions were like a storm, loud, unstoppable, dangerous. She went to the balcony and leaned against the railing. The city stretched before her, glowing with thousands of lights. Couples walked hand in hand below, families strolled together, children ran with joy. Elena's throat tightened. "Where do I belong?" she whispered into the night. Her phone buzzed again. She picked it up, hoping for some comfort. It was a message from her cousin. "Hi, Elena. Mom says we're worried about you. You're not married yet, and it's embarrassing. People ask questions. You should really think about it seriously now." Her hand shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. Embarrassing. That one word stabbed deeper than all the rest. She wasn't just pitied, she was considered a shame to her own family. The tears she had held back finally broke free. She sank to the ground, curling her knees to her chest, sobbing into her hands. Every insult, every whisper, every mocking laugh, every cold word came crashing into her all at once. She had carried the weight for so long, but now it was too much. The sobs shook her body until she could barely breathe. For a moment, she wished she could vanish into the night, dissolve into the air, and escape the cruelty of the world. But as she cried, a small thought pushed through the storm inside her. If they will not see my worth, I must learn to see it myself. The idea was faint, fragile, but it was there. Somewhere in her brokenness, a seed of strength still remained. She wiped her face, her breaths uneven but steadier now. She stood slowly, her body weak but her eyes a little sharper. The night sky stretched wide above her, endless and uncaring, yet filled with possibility. Elena whispered to herself, "I cannot let them decide my story. Not anymore." For the first time, her pain did not feel like a prison. It felt like a turning point. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew this. The whispers could no longer own her. The unexpected kindness morning after her breaking point was quiet. Elena woke with swollen eyes, her pillow damp from tears. For a long moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if getting up was even worth it. The apartment, was heavy with silence, and her chest carried the weight of last night's sobs. She finally forced herself to rise, dragging her feet to the kitchen. She boiled water for tea, her hands moving slowly, her mind empty. She felt fragile, as though one more cruel word from the world would shatter her completely. When she stepped outside to fetch the morning newspaper, the sunlight was warm against her face. The street smelled faintly of fresh bread from the bakery. At the corner, she almost turned back inside, but then she noticed an old woman sitting on the steps of the building next door. The woman's basket of vegetables had tipped over, and tomatoes rolled across the pavement. Without thinking, Elena rushed over. She bent down, gathering the scattered vegetables and placing them gently back in the basket. The old woman looked up at her with tired eyes and whispered, "Thank you, child. My legs aren't strong anymore." Elena smiled faintly. "It's no trouble. Let me help you carry this inside." Together they walked slowly up the steps. The woman's apartment was small and dim, smelling of herbs and old wood. Elena placed the basket on the table. The woman touched her arm and said softly, "You are kind. So many passed me by, but you stopped." Those simple words pierced Elena's heart, but not like the cruel whispers of others. These words healed instead of hurting. She blinked back tears and smiled again. "Kindness should not be rare," she replied. The woman nodded. "Yet it is. You are special. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." Elena froze. How could this stranger see her so clearly? She mumbled a thank you and left quickly, but her heart carried those words all the way back to her apartment. "You are special. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." For the first time in days, Elena's chest felt lighter. Later that afternoon, Elena decided to walk through the park. She wanted air, trees, something natural to soften the sharpness of the city. The park was alive with children chasing each other, joggers moving with steady rhythm, couples sitting on benches. She walked slowly along the path, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves. As she passed a playground, a little girl tripped and fell. Her ice cream spilled onto the ground, and she began to cry. Her mother was distracted, speaking on the phone. Not noticing, Elena knelt down and offered the girl her hand. "Don't cry, sweetheart. You're okay." She wiped the dirt from the girl's knee with her handkerchief. The girl sniffled and asked, "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Elena smiled gently. "Because everyone deserves a little care." The girl's mother finally noticed and rushed over, apologizing quickly. She bought the child a new ice cream and then turned to Elena. "Thank you so much." Not many people would stop. Elena simply nodded and continued walking. But inside, something was shifting. She had spent so long hearing the voices of those who judged her, who defined her worth by what she lacked. Yet here, in small, quiet moments, strangers were noticing something else: her kindness, her care, her humanity. She found a bench near the lake and sat down, watching the water ripple under the breeze. Ducks floated calmly across the surface, and the sky was painted with soft gold as the sun lowered. Elena took a deep breath. She thought of the old woman's words, the child's innocent question, the mother's gratitude. These voices were different. They saw her not as incomplete, but as whole in her own way. For the first time, Elena wondered if she had been measuring herself by the wrong standards all along. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from her cousin. "Elena, please think about marriage. People talk. It's embarrassing." She looked at the screen for a long time, but this time, she didn't cry. Instead, she typed a slow reply. "I am not an embarrassment. I may be single, but I am not broken. Please remember that." Her hand trembled as she hit send. But when the message was gone, she felt a new strength rising inside her. Fragile, but real. The sky darkened, stars beginning to peek out. Elena stood from the bench, feeling taller, lighter. She whispered to herself, "I am still here. I am still enough." The night wrapped around her, but for the first time in a long while, it did not feel like loneliness. It felt like space where she could breathe, space where she could grow. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this. Kindness had reminded her of something she had forgotten. Her worth was not given by men, or family, or whispers. It was already hers. The new beginnings of the morning arrived with soft sunlight streaming through Elena's window. The city outside was just waking up, bakeries pulling up shutters, children chasing a football down the street, pigeons fluttering from rooftops. Elena stood by the mirror, brushing her hair slowly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't see only loneliness staring back at her. She saw a woman who had survived pain and was still standing. The lines on her face no longer felt like scars of failure. They looked like marks of endurance. She smiled faintly at her reflection. "This is not the end," she whispered. "This is only a beginning." Elena decided to spend the day differently. Instead of hiding at home, she went to a community center nearby, a place she had passed many times but never entered. A flyer on the door read, "Volunteers needed food drive for families in need." Her heart hesitated, but her feet moved forward. Inside, the room buzzed with activity. People packed boxes with rice, flour, and canned goods. Children wrote cheerful notes to slip inside the bags. The air smelled of warm bread, and laughter filled every corner. A woman with curly hair approached Elena. "Hi there. First time volunteering?" Elena nodded. "Yes, I just wanted to help." "Wonderful," the woman said warmly. "We can always use more hands. Come, join us." Elena rolled up her sleeves and began packing boxes. At first, her movements were slow, careful, as though she was testing unfamiliar ground. But soon, she found herself working easily, side by side with others. They smiled at her, thanked her, treated her not as the single woman at 45, but simply as another human being sharing. Kindness. When the first family arrived to collect the box, Elena handed it over. The mother, tired but grateful, clasped her hands. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." Those words struck Elena's heart with warmth. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. As the hours passed, Elena laughed with strangers, shared stories, and even played with the children who ran between tables. No one asked her why she wasn't married. No one whispered about her age. They only saw her presence, her effort, her kindness. By evening, when the food drive ended, Elena stood outside the center, the golden sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her hands were tired, her back ached, but her soul felt alive. For so long, she had believed her worth was measured by what others expected: marriage, children, a family. But here, she had given something real. She had touched lives, even in small ways. That was love too, a kind of love the world often overlooked. She walked home with light steps, her heart carrying this new truth. The following week at work, things were different. When her co-workers made their usual jokes about her being single, Elena did not shrink. She looked up calmly and said, "Yes, I'm single, and I'm proud of the life I've built. I may not have a husband, but I have strength, compassion, and independence. That is not less. It is enough." The room fell silent. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, but Elena did not care. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time, she felt free. Later, Lila approached her quietly. "Elena, I admire you. I wish I had your courage." Those words melted some of the loneliness inside her. She realized she wasn't only carrying her own burden, she was showing others that a woman could stand strong, even without following society's narrow path. That weekend, Elena returned to the community center. She volunteered again, and this time, people greeted her like an old friend. She began to find a rhythm, helping, giving, connecting. One afternoon, the old woman she had helped with the vegetables appeared at the center. She spotted Elena and smiled knowingly. "I told you, child. You are special." Elena laughed softly, tears forming in her eyes. "Maybe I'm starting to believe it now." Months passed. Elena turned her journal into something more. She began writing essays about strength, loneliness, and self-worth. She shared them with the community center, where they pinned her words on the wall. People read them, nodded, and told her, "This speaks to me." For the first time in her life, Elena was not invisible. She was not the woman who failed to marry. She was Elena, the woman who touched lives, who gave hope, who stood tall despite the world's cruel whispers. One evening, she sat again by her window, looking at the city lights. But this time, the silence inside her apartment did not feel like emptiness. It felt like peace. She whispered to herself, 45 and single, but not broken, never broken. "This is my beginning." And for the first time in many years, her whisper carried no sadness, only strength.